A glitch in a matrix. The saying was made popular since originating from the movie in the late 90s. The movie put forth the idea that we could be living in a computer-like simulation. And like most computer programs, there tends to be errors that cause some strange things to happen in the program. If it was true, this would be applied to strange, unexplained occurrences that happen to people across the world. Like when something seems out of place, or seemingly impossible, or things have changed. Kind of, for instance, like the Mandela effect. With that said, I found a few examples that might lend credibility to this idea. I'll let you be the judge of that. I have 4 kids. I know I have 4 kids. But recently, I feel like I should have another one. But it's missing. When we go out, I head count and get flustered because I can't find an extra one. I have to consistently remind myself that we only have 4. But my heart just doesn't believe it. I just put it down to one of those weird feelings and push it aside. Then my parents set aside money for my kids. They sent me $500. I called them and I asked them why so much. They were confused and they said they sent $100 per kid. I laughed and said they must be getting old because they were thinking there was 5. Not only that, but recently my daughter walked into the lounge room and she looked around and she said she knew that we were all here, but the family felt small, and my sons tend to agree. Haven't said anything to anyone else about my feelings because they already think I'm ancient and forgetful, seeing that I'm 40. Does anyone else have these feelings? A few weeks ago, not a long while back, I went out driving, and I observed the pedestrians standing by the traffic light. They all reached into their pocket, and they looked for their phone. They did this when the light went green, and they started across the road. Nothing significant or strange about this, just one of those mundane things that I noticed. Today I was driving with my daughter, and we stopped at a red light, and there was a man standing there. Nothing out of the ordinary. Denim jacket, black hat, glasses, about 6'2". I thought I might weird out my daughter. She's about 5, so I was going to blow her little mind. So I said, "See that man? When the walking man goes green and he starts to walk across, he'll reach into his pocket and he'll pull out his phone. And he'll start looking at his phone. Watch and see." As he walks across, he reached into his pocket, but immediately he takes his hand out. He looks and points right at me, with his mouth open smiling, like saying, "Gotcha." Of course, my daughter, she thought it was absolutely hilarious. I sat there with my mind completely blown. I must have sat there in silence looking at him as he crossed the road for the next 10 seconds. As I drove on, I had to look at him, and he was still smirking and laughing. I've been playing this through my head all day. The windows were up, the radio was on, and I wasn't shouting. My voice was not even remotely raised. It might have been an extreme coincidence that he wanted to play on someone at the same time. He must have been 15 to 20 feet away from me. How could he have heard me? It's literally impossible. How did he know that I was trying to predict what he would do? The only even remote possibility that I can think of is that he had the same observation as me, and he thought that I might be thinking the same thing, so just went for it. But realistically, what is the chances of that? Recently I was sitting on my couch as my dog walked by, and she sat on her bed. We have like an L-shaped sectional, which her bed is behind. She had something small caught in her throat, because last night she was eating popcorn, so she must have had a shell caught in there. So I'm just paying attention to her breathing and making sure she got it out. For a few minutes, her breathing was fine. Then something like a light snore started to happen. It was semi-normal for her, depending on what position she was laying in, so I didn't bother to go over there and check on her. This went on for about 5 minutes, until the most disgusting, and later to my realization, terrifying snore, cough, wheeze sound started happening. I went over to check on her to make sure she was okay. And at that exact moment that I looked at the bed, the sound stopped mid-breath, and she wasn't there. She was outside with my parents. They'd been out there for around 30 minutes. There was no way to get out of the room without walking past me. I don't know whose dog I saw. What was making that creepy sound that was only 5 feet away from me? I decided to stay outside for the rest of the day. I might hire an exorcist. I'm really not sure if this belongs here, but here it goes. When I was 15, I was incredibly depressed. I was struggling with OCD and anxiety. I got to the point where I decided to kill myself. I arranged everything. A note, when, where, how, and I waited. I waited for about a week, until my parents went out to dinner. I attached a note to the door, telling my parents not to come in, and just call the police. I got dressed in my nicest clothes. I showered, did my hair, and I put a suicide note in my pocket. My dad, he had a number of guns, so I chose one of them so I can do the deed. It was a Beretta 92 handgun. So I went to the bedroom, I turned on some music, laid down on my bed, put the barrel to my mouth, sang a few lines from Free Falling through the tears, and I pulled the trigger. Then I went into third person. I was watching myself. I saw myself laying dead on the bed, slumped over and bleeding everywhere. I watched myself lie there, and it seemed like forever. Then suddenly, I felt like the wind was knocked out of me, and I was back in my body. The gun had jammed. I threw it to the ground, and I sobbed into my pillow for hours before cleaning up everything and going to sleep. I have no idea what happened that day, but I'm more grateful than you can ever imagine. After that, I really made an effort to turn my life around, and I did. It's scary thinking about that. I wouldn't be here right now if it would have worked. This happened several months ago, and it still messes with my head. I was walking with a couple of friends down the street. Nothing weird or crazy. I was in the middle of my sentence when I abruptly stopped, like I hit a wall. My shirt was wet, but in my head, I was assuming it was some weird unrelated thing. At first, I thought I ran into a post, but there was nothing nearby. Well, I just shrugged it off and thought nothing of it, and I kept on walking. Well, skip ahead an hour or two, and we're on our way back. I'm walking in the opposite direction, and I'm drinking from my water bottle. I'm talking to my friends, and I abruptly stop. Again, I feel like I ran into something, and my water bottle spills all over the ground in front of me. I look around, and sure enough, I was in the exact same spot from an hour or two ago. I have no clue what happened. There was nothing around, just like last time. This still messes with my brain, and my concept on reality. About 6 years ago, I was like 14 years old. I was walking through a small trail throughout my parents' property. This was a regular thing I used to do, because I just moved into the area, and it was sort of like an old-fashioned farm. He had old-fashioned farm equipment and old shacks that was in the woods on the property. My parents were pretty wealthy, and they had purchased well over 100 acres. They still own it to this day, and there was a few streams that was running through it. It was sometime in the afternoon, and I was walking on a narrow path, and I noticed a golden retriever. He ran right out into the path, right in front of me out of the bushes. I was curious, and I was considering, I don't have a dog, and there wasn't any neighbors around 5 miles or so. It looked at me and it began to bark. It stopped in its tracks, and it looked very agitated. A few moments later, a man, about 19 or 20 years old, comes running out of the brush, and he stops in his tracks. He looks really confused when he sees me, and he yells, "Hey, what are you doing here?" and he starts to chase me. I instantly sprint as fast as I can. I go back to the house, and I didn't have any intent on looking back. I heard him yell a few times. "Hey, wait!" The voice sounded scarily familiar, and eventually halfway through the woods, I couldn't hear the voice anymore. He didn't seem to be following me. However, I didn't stop. I got back to the house as fast as possible. I told my parents about this, and my stepfather actually went out, and he retrieved his rifle and proceeded to look for this guy for an hour or so, basically finding no evidence of what happened. I actually got grounded for this because they thought I was lying, and my parents are very Christian and basically assumed it was just another tall tale from their rebellious child. Okay, now that we made it through this part, this is where it starts to get absolutely weird. Around 5 weeks ago, I was visiting my parents' house with my girlfriend. She has a golden retriever. A few hours into the visit, and everything was going just fine. I was talking with the family and enjoyed a few drinks. Being at home for a change, instead of working my daily 9-to-5 job, it was nice. I stepped out and had the dog with me. I started to smoke a cigarette, and for no reason, the dog decided to dash into the woods at full speed. As fast as I could run, I ran after him, and eventually I lost track of him. It wasn't until 5 minutes later that I heard him barking at something. I quickly ran to the sound, and I found him no more than 15 feet away from a kid that was playing in the woods. I looked at him confused, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I started to walk toward him, but the kid booked it. He went as fast as he could through the thicket of bushes, and he literally completely vanished. I've never experienced something like this, and during the moment, I had actually no idea. But later on I realized he was wearing the exact same clothes that I would have worn when I was 14. I told my girlfriend about it, and she thinks I'm insane. But it actually happened, and I can't explain it. Anyway, that's my story about the time that I chased myself. Has anyone else had a similar experience? There is no way that I'm the only one. I lived at the coast of Washington for a few years. It's a small town in Ravensdale. Surrounding the area is a couple of larger towns, like Maple Valley and Covington, and a few other smaller ones. There are some beautiful scenic back roads. I used to spend hours exploring all the different routes I could find. On one of the back roads, though, which was one of my main routes to work, I'd take some back roads, and I would go through Ravensdale to Maple Valley. Then I'd hop on the highway and take it to Auburn. Now the glitch happened to me on one section of the back road, before you hit the main stretch, toward Covington and Maple Valley. The road winds a bit, but it's not bad. It's a gentle back and forth, left and right, until you hit a straighter stretch. At the end of the straight stretch, it curves sharply to the right. Then it continues with a gentle left to right curve until you hit the intersection of the main road. I've driven this road so many times, it's muscle memory by now. I was heading to work one morning. I've gotten to the straight stretch, and it was around midsummer, so it was already full daylight. It was beautiful. It was nearly a cloudless day, which doesn't always happen in this area. I was well rested, and I had my coffee with me, and I was listening to some upbeat music. I was driving along when I suddenly had this feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but I'll do my best. It was like, out of nowhere, my stomach tightened so hard that I couldn't feel my tongue on the back of my throat. The hair on my neck and my arms shot straight up. I felt very cold, but not like it's cold outside. Kind of like when you're freezing, but you're still running a bad fever. My hands were gripping the steering wheel really hard, like white knuckles hard. It felt like my arms had locked up at my joints. All these sensations hit me at the same time. Then a thought struck me. I've driven this road 1,000 times. You know that you have it timed perfectly to get to work. Otherwise, you'd be caught in horrible traffic. So I left work at the same time every day. and the drive always took me the same amount of time. I knew this for a fact. I should have made it to the sharp right turn by now. It should have only been a second or two away, but there was nothing but straight road ahead of me. You can clearly see, in the area where there's no paved roads, it's just thick pine trees. You can clearly see where the trees part to make way for the road. It's a very noticeable gap. I can see the parting of the trees, and the road just continued straight on. The sharp right turn, it appeared to be a quarter of a mile down the road. Now here's where my glitch was a little bit different. Now for the glitch. Another thought popped into my head. It was like it was my voice, but not my voice. Like it was my voice in my head, but an imposter. It said, "I should keep driving. It'll be okay." Something about it creeped me out, because it wasn't me thinking that. I don't know how else to say it. It's like someone tried to use my own internal monologue to override my actions, to try to convince me that I was safe. In that moment, I kind of panicked. I snapped to action, I guess. Without thinking, I immediately jerked the wheel to the right, even though it looked like the turn was 300 yards away. As I yanked the wheel over and headed right, I kept looking to my left, and I swear the road stayed straight, even though my instincts screamed otherwise. And eerily, I was right. The turn wasn't 300 yards away. It was right where I freaked out and jerked the wheel. If I hadn't made a snap decision, I would have plowed right through. Nothing but a small forest of thick, tall pine trees at about 60 miles an hour. I would have been dead. A couple of weeks later, I was driving with my boyfriend, and he was in the passenger seat. This was one of the first times I've driven with him. We decided to head down the same road. When we came to the sharp turn, he slightly kissed two of his fingers and made the peace sign. Trying not to think much about it, I asked him what he was doing. He replied that his oldest brother had crashed and died at that bend. He drove straight off the road. Several other crashes had happened in the same stretch, but I'm not sure if that can be accounted to the glitch. They have signs posted on the road, not to drink and drive, and those signs, they list the name of some of the people that died there due to what they call alcohol-related accidents. Many of those are likely due to alcohol, but I can't help to wonder if any of those fell to the same trap that I almost did. Thank you very much for joining me for this edition of The Creepier. So what do you think? You think we live in a matrix or something else entirely? Regardless, I think these things are fascinating. We don't know 100% how the universe works. All we can do is guess. We do have a few things that we can say, absolutely this is the way it is, based on our limited understanding. But there still is a lot of mystery out there. A lot of things to discover. Be safe out there, and until next time, this is Dallas, signing off.